The War of the Ring mode for the BFME games is a classic mode many people don't seem to like to talk about, which is a complete shame to me because there's so much great stuff it has to offer, even for some of its shortcomings. While very much inspired by bigger RTS titles like Total War for instance, it's a much simplified but still very fun version that puts you into Middle-earth via the BFME mechanics. Given that so few people seem to want to talk about this mode, I'm here to shed some light on this underrated aspect of the BFME games in ways maybe most folks don't care about or have never even thought about. And this comes directly out of how inspiring the Age of the Ring mod is in its complete overhaul of this mode. Working from the ground up, the developers added a massive amount of new content to the AOTR version and greatly expanded on its mechanics, even adding some new ones along the way. The Age of the Ring mod's overhaul is controversial to a lot of folks, so I wanted to take a deep dive into the various pros and cons for both the vanilla game and AOTR's overhaul to hopefully give a more well-rounded perspective on everything and help folks to better appreciate the mode in general across both games. I'll try to cover just about everything there is to cover on this mode for both versions. I'll first compare the various key territories on the Living World map between both games to get a good handle on the overall picture. Then I'll detail everything from the various scenarios offered in both games to the actual major gameplay differences and mechanics offered by them. These details will include a thorough breakdown of the various territory bonuses, such as resource, experience, attack, and defense bonuses, what secret features the AOTR mod includes in its overhaul, such as various hidden units, and I'll conclude with my own full final thoughts on the vanilla game and what I think of the AOTR overhaul on the whole. As a sort of appendix, I'll even cover a little bit on the history of this game mode going back to BFME 1 and its incredible Living World map for its story campaign before showing how those basic mechanics were expanded upon in BFME 2 and even touching a little bit on mods like the Adine mod. It's a lot to take in, honestly, so let's just start with the Living World map. If we're going to look in detail at the vanilla game's Living World map, we should first consult Tolkien's own map for best reference. This is the northwest of Middle-earth as is found in the backs of all Lord of the Rings books. Fans of the books know this map very well. But there are official variations on this map, depending on the edition of the book. Some, like my own personal single-volume paperback, show this extent of Middle-earth. But I've always seen more detail of places like Gondor especially. And of course, in The Hobbit, you have the map of Wilderland. So lots of detail to give a good sense of the overall picture of the northwest of Middle-earth. And here is a clean overview of the whole vanilla game map, as found in the files of the game itself. It's a very high-resolution satellite kind of image. Quite beautiful in all its breathtaking scope, I have to admit, really bringing the world to life. You'll notice, however, that places like Isengard, Helm's Deep, Minas Tirith, etc. are not on this map. This map is great for certain details like the Long Lake, which is all but impossible to see in the in-game version of the map. The topography of the mountains and hills is stunning. You'll also see the Shire and little settlements here and there. And here we have the 3D version of this map without the territories, only the regions. You'll notice there are some important places now like Rivendell, Erebor, Isengard, Helm's Deep, Minas Tirith, the Black Gate, Dol Guldur, and even Cirith Ungol. Notice, however, that Minas Morgul is strangely missing. I love how you can do this with this version in the game files to get a real sense of the 3D map, such as the hills of Emyn Arnen southeast of Minas Tirith, to say nothing of the details on the White City and the other places like it. And here is the actual in-game version, with all the territories and all key places, including Carn Dûm and Fornost in the far north, and even Barad-dûr. Anyone who knows the map of Middle-earth well will immediately see some very strange or odd aspects of the vanilla games version. While pretty cool in some ways for bringing the map to life with color and animations, like the eagles flying or smoke erupting from Mount Doom, cloud cover, etc., the territories, borders, and boundaries of Middle-earth are quite different. Most of this is likely due to the various constraints of the time when the game was made, such as time used, money, and so on. Regardless, many of these choices made are hard to understand, especially for folks like myself who have a real fondness and respect for the source material, and we'll get into these details of various key territories later in the series. In the vanilla War of the Ring map, there are 7 regions divided up into 43 territories if you play on the whole map. Later in the series, we'll delve into the various scenarios which have you play in certain areas of the map in certain ways. It's a very different world when you come to the vastly overhauled map of the Age of the Ring mod, however. These developers were not constrained by time or money, but by the limitations of their own ingenuity and creativity, and it shows. As you can see, they overhauled the Living World map to be far more in line with how Middle-earth is represented in the books, adding many new territories and even using their own imagination as to how some of the further regions in the east and south may have looked. I'm not too sure why they would have so much unused space in the east, though. Possibly for future submodders to fill it in? Who knows? But it's a great touch, which puts their own stamp on it for sure. In AOTR, they now have 13 regions divided into 173 territories and 43 subregions, which is an all-new mechanic we'll get into later in the series. Compared to Vanilla, which, as you'll recall, has 7 regions and 43 territories. Notice how it's the subregions, not the territories, which are color-coded on this map. So each subregion typically has several territories to gain special bonuses, and there are additional bonuses to be gained by uniting several subregions into whole regions. And here's the map with the names of the subregions instead of the territories. This is a lot to take in for this overhaul, but very important once we start looking at the details later in the series. By the way, you can easily access these in your game files. They're just JPEGs, so you can pull them up and look at them in detail like any other picture file. Here's how the map is actually laid out in-game, making it look like a real paper map with weathered edges on a wooden table prepped as a board game. And if that weren't enough, they even added some fine artistic details to make the map pop. Details akin to accents and artistic flares found in ancient maps. Very nice touch. It's hard to see this even when zooming in, but like how Vanilla has its own miniature versions of various key places like Minas Tirith, Erebor, etc., the AOTR map does too. Here are a few stills to see them in better detail. They're basically like little miniature game pieces for a board game. Very cool. And there are a few more in-game than these. By the way, if you like this kind of deep dive and want more great BFME analysis of its mechanics, check out these series of mine. There's the Attribute Modifier series where I break down in great detail how modifiers actually work, comparing the vanilla games to the massive overhaul the Age of the Ring mod implemented over them. There's also the Stealth series, where I show how stealth really works, again comparing vanilla to AOTR, and the beginning of the Unit Analysis series with the Berserkers unit. I also have a growing library of tutorials on how to use the BFME World Builder and how to mod, along with lots of great gameplay videos besides. Well, this about wraps up this intro and overview. In the next section, we'll look in detail at various lands and places taken out of the Vanilla Games War of the Ring map and how the Age of the Ring mod restores them to their rightful places, and showing those various locations in sweeping detail to give those who've yet to play the Age of the Ring mod a good sense of what it does for BFME gaming. Don't miss it.